Good morning, everyone. Thanks for our ones that turned up early. Just to confirm that we have got a 9:30 start for this. So if you want to go and grab a cup of tea or anything, come back at 9:30. That'll be brilliant. But thank you for joining early. Right, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our meeting today. Hope everybody can see and hear. I'm Carol Valentine. I'm Head of Business Services here at Highways and Transportation. Just like to welcome you to our annual parish seminar. I'm just going to run through some domestics and then we'll get into the actual meat of the meeting. So we've got two parish events this year. The first one's virtual, which is today, and we've got another one in person on the 20th of November. If you've got colleagues who haven't been able to make it today, then by all means, they can sign up for the 20th of November when the details go out. So this is a Teams webinar meeting and your camera and mic have been disabled during the presentations, just so that we don't get any disruption. But as far as questions are concerned, we've provided plenty of times for you to ask questions. If you have a look at the agenda, which hopefully you've had a chance to see, and we've just had it up, there are times throughout the day when you'll be able to ask questions. There's also, you notice, a question and answer panel, a Q&A panel, so please feel free to put your questions in there. Then they'll be put to the speakers or the panel and answered by a member of the team. You may also find throughout the seminar that your questions are being answered in the chat, and that's great as well. You can also raise your electronic hand, then you'll be able to unmute and ask any questions. We do want to keep things running to time, so if we don't get to your question, then we will get back to you with the answers, provided you put them in the Q&A. We can't answer very specific or localized questions, so if anything does arise that's very local, please feel free to contact the relevant officer who'll be happy to help you. We have got a break scheduled for today at around about 11:25 for 15 minutes, but of course, this is a Teams webinar. If you need to go off and do something, that's absolutely fine. We are recording today's proceedings, and the recording will be sent to Charmaine at Calc after the in-person parish seminar on the 20th of November, and she'll then disseminate that in the normal way. So that's all the domestics, I think. So I'd just like to start by if you can just see the agenda here. We've got, just go back, thank you, Raji. So we've got a section starting off with our director. There'll be an opportunity for questions. Then we've got EU entry and exit. I won't run through everything. You'll go through the agenda as you can see. We've got questions and a break. And then at the end, we'll have a wrap up by our director. So without too much more from me, I'd like to welcome our Cabinet Member for Highways and Transportation, Neil Baker, to speak to address you. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Carol, and good morning to everyone. It's good to see you again this year. I see we've got 105 people on the call, which is a great number. And I'm also looking forward to the in-person meeting, which we've not held in some years, in November. I've been in role since August last year now, which is enough time to get frustrated and perhaps not enough time to get things done in what is an ever-challenging but frustrating role. You will see in your own parishes and towns the sheer scale of the issues we have to deal with. Carol touching on localized issues made me think how we can go from the very small to the very large. Just half hour ago, I was dealing with reports of a loose manhole cover, which were causing people sleepless nights. Later today, I've got meetings about the new EU entry-exit strategy, which we'll talk about later. And of course, at the end of the week, we're looking for a decision on the Lower Thames crossing. So the role really does cover everything from the incredibly local to the international. And I think it's important to say at a meeting like this, I never discount the importance of that local thing. Because while, a single small road, lines that aren't painted as well as they could be, signs that are perhaps not where they could be at problem areas, it's not the most important thing in the world. But frankly, to those living with it every day, it can have such a massive impact that it's important we do keep on top of things wherever possible. Now, that is one of the great frustrations in all of this. Now, I don't want to do a complete woe is me speech. At the same time, I'm not going to play the game of Emperor's New Clothes, because you'll quickly point out I'm naked. I think what we have to accept is we are operating in a very difficult financial world. Twofold, really. One is the level of funding we get from national government, which over many decades, and this is of course a national thing, which has been touched upon more and more in the press, highways have been underfunded. And it's one of those things, you can get away with underfunding your roads for 1 year, 2 years, a few years. But eventually that lack of routine maintenance due to having to tightening your prioritisation more and more does lead, unfortunately, to some rather severe problems when things go wrong. And of course, at a county council level, it's understandable why these things happen, because if you were creating a company, any sort of company, you probably wouldn't dream of creating one that has to undertake the sorts of services that Kent County Council does. But what that means is there are so many conflicting pressures, not just within highways and transport, but across the entire organisation. And absolutely within the people services, there will always be times where there is immediate cash needed. And sometimes that does lead to money going away from highways, which I would rather we could keep. And I don't want to get into a big discussion today about the whole devolution agenda or how things could be done like that. But I think, as the Deputy Leader and Finance Cabinet Member Peter Oakford says to anybody who will listen to him, until a government or of whatever party finally gets to grips with properly funding adult social care and social care in general, everything else is going to be a struggle within local government. And that is what we're seeing. But away from the negativity, away from the fact that our backlog is 750 million for road maintenance, 1.1 billion for all of the assets, including that, and it's going up by a significant number of tens of millions each year. We still have a dedicated team of staff working tirelessly to keep Kent moving safely and efficiently. And I see that on a daily basis. Recently, I was up at Swanscombe talking to the Future Roads Minister about the catastrophic Galley Hill collapse and how we could do with some help to get that road back working once all of the investigations have been concluded. And I saw there members working on roads because other areas had had sinkholes appear, or not actual sinkholes, washouts beneath the surface, working extreme hours to keep the communities happy. And that does go on everywhere. It's not always seen, it's not always appreciated, but there really are a strong cohort of staff who want to keep Kent moving. They live in Kent, they cherish Kent, they understand the problems. I get as frustrated as all of you with almost everything, really. When we have ideas to make roads safer and the funding's not there, when we worry there are roads where there are going to be accidents, but we then get told, oh, there hasn't been a crash history so far, or no, actually, the average speed is not high enough for us to have to do anything about this, when we all know actually it's not the average speed which is the problem. It is those who do race significantly higher than those speeds and do cause great concerns. That comes with prioritization that I've touched upon, and that is incredibly frustrating because with a far larger pot of money we'd be able to tackle so much more. We're soon to be entering the winter season, which I think is actually when highways almost come to their best, actually the public face of. We'll see the crews out there keeping the main routes open through thick or thin. And it's probably important to stress, as I always try to, that those who get all of the praise for putting the grit and salt on the roads in the winter are the same people who get a little bit of criticism at times, unfairly I should add, when they're trying to keep the roads maintained at the rest of the year. They don't suddenly become great people in the winter, they truly are great people all year round. But I think the importance of this seminar really, as I said at last year's, it's a chance for us to see what is going on in various parts of highways and transport, be it those big issues like EU entry exit, which, trust me, will impact far more than just the Port of Dover and Eurotunnel. Touching upon the highways improvement plans, something I try and grasp with my own one, frustratingly at times. And then some interesting issues at a time we are with a new government that perhaps are in a state of flux. Public transport being one of them. The new government has made a big play about being keen to do far more for public transport, and I think many of us here, all of us perhaps, would love to see that because we have seen bus services absolutely disappear in many of our villages for many years now. But of course, the concern is that while the words do sound good, without that funding coming with it, if we're expected to fund new bus services from our own existing budgets, I mean, frankly, it's not going to happen. So we do need to keep having those conversations with government to ensure that the sort of changes they're talking about, which may work in London, may work in the big metro areas, they also need to think in Westminster and Whitehall what would work in the small villages and the towns across Kent, where we're not talking about making bus services better, we're talking about restarting them, having had them completely gutted over many years. So we've got a lot to come ahead, got a lot of good people on the call. I hope you enjoyed today, and also in November, for those of you who come along to that as well. We'll have question sessions after all of them. I would encourage you, as Carol has, to ask those questions. And of course, after the meeting, if anything does come to you, as often happens at these things, oh, I thought I could have asked that, please pop an email across and we'll get back to you. But once again, good to see you today. Enjoy today, and let's have some good discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. And as you said, people will have an opportunity to ask you questions later. And before I pass over to Haroon, I just wanted to let people know that if they're just looking at the screen with all the different icons on, the little tiles, if you press on view and press speaker, you'll get a chance, you'll be able to see the person who's speaking. So, and that might make things a little bit easier. So I'd just like to pass over now to our director, Haroon Chugtai.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all here, and thank you so much for giving us your time today. And if you enjoy it so much, you can come along on the 20th as well. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Haroon Chugtai. I am the Director of Kent Highways and Transportation, responsibility for everything that moves on the roads, as well as sort of strategic issues such like the EU entry-exit system, which is going to be coming in the autumn. And we've got a topic on that for discussion later. I just wanted to say that you've obviously seen a lot of the press articles recently, and as Neil has alluded to as well, we're under unprecedented financial sort of pressures here at KCC, and we're doing our best with what we have. We continue, as Neil has said, to work with central government, looking at funding opportunities, understanding where we can get more income from central government, from grants. Our active travel schemes have been absolutely brilliant, and thank you all to who replied to the KC Whip consultation. And as many of you are aware, the local transport plan consultation is also out, so please do feedback to that as well. We are, as Neil has said, our main priority here is to keep Kent moving, keeping the highways network moving and enabling all journeys to be made safely and efficiently as possible. My team's working towards that with that objective in mind, and obviously being as efficient as they can be within the resourcing envelope that we have. So we understand the challenges that you have at parish level, but I'm grateful for you, for those who have worked with our teams, that you understand the challenges that we have, and that we'll continue to sort of work together on all of the number of areas, whether it be strategic delivery or the local areas, as Neil has said, that do sort of impact on the parishes, and how we can work together to solve those with the envelopes that we have. We've always valued our relationship with CALC, and that's why we're holding the parish seminars again, and last year's was a success. We had some really positive feedback, and we'll continue to work sort of really well together and in partnership, so that we can ensure that communications to the right people are made, and the importance of highways both locally and at a strategic level, and also delivering the outcomes that we have done, and many of those are going to be discussed today. However, if there's anything that you can do to highlight how important the work of highways and transportation is at your level, and also to the wider community, we would really welcome that, whether that be to your parish members, your local councillors, your local MPs, and even if you get the opportunity to speak to officials from the Department for Transport or other departments as well. I think it's absolutely imperative that we ensure that everybody understands that transport is the key enabler of most of the services that we all benefit and use across the county. Now, I don't want to hold up the conversation with my detailed colleagues and presentations that we've got lined up in the agenda, but I will like to hand over to Charmaine to say a few words and just express my thanks to everybody in CALC on all the work we've been doing together over the last year. Charmaine.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you that I have not yet met, I'm Charmaine Keatley, the Chief Executive of the Kent Association of Local Councils. It is a pleasure to see so many of you here today, and I'd like to begin by expressing my thanks to Kent County Council for organising and attending this event. So really, it's essential for Calc members to understand the strong working relationship that we have with KCC Highways and Transport. The Calc chairman, Neville Hudson, the Transport Advisory Committee chairman, Sarah Barker, and I meet quarterly with the heads of highways and transport. The important information from these meetings is shared with both the Calc Executive Committee and the Transport Advisory Committee, with updates for our parishes featured in the Calc News. This year, our agenda has included key topics such as the highways improvement plans, the ongoing focus on the pothole blitz, the introduction of moving traffic offences in September, procurement and the AMI contract, free public transport initiatives, transport funding, and what that may look like under the new administration, and an ongoing emphasis on community transport. We've also strengthened our relationship with the Road Safety and Active Travel Group for East and West Kent. So they are the team that you will see overseeing the HIPs. We're pleased to see their quarterly newsletter that's new, and this enhances communication between their team and parish and town councils. It's full of valuable resources, and I'd like to thank the team for their ongoing efforts in producing it. There have been 2 so far, and I really would recommend reading that. So now if I turn your attention to partnerships beyond KCC. So Calc plays a key role in community resilience and emergency planning, and we actively participate in the Kent and Medway Resilience Forum. This partnership of organisations works to improve the resilience of Kent and Medway, ensuring a coordinated response to any emergencies. So as we've already heard in today, there is the introduction of the new entry-exit scheme on the 10th of November, and this has been a focal point for this group. In particular, the Dover Area Committee has been directly engaged, receiving a presentation from the Resilience Forum and Dover District Council. And Dover District Council has created direct communication channels for the affected parishes, which will be crucial in informing the response of the forum. However, we do recognise at Calc that the EES will have wider implications beyond Dover, which is why we've requested an update for all parishes in Kent today. And we've had a previous update at the Resilience conference that we did earlier in the year. So as many of you are aware, or at least I really hope you are, with the change in central government administration, Calc has been meeting with MPs to present and represent the concerns and experiences of parish and town councils. So previously, these meetings have provided valuable opportunities to discuss issues such as bus service funding and the effects of that on social isolation and climate change. To support this work, Calc has created a dedicated highways and transport hub on our new website. So if you haven't already accessed the new website, please do contact Laura for a login. You can also get this via your clerk. And while the website is still developing, there is a section and a hub for transport, and this has the Transport Advisory Committee meeting notes on and contact information should you wish to submit an agenda item for discussion. This two-way communication will help Calc to gain a deeper understanding of the issues affecting you, so please do get in touch. This feedback that we receive, we can also put through to our national body, NAUC, so they can have this and they can influence national policy and influence their guides. So I'm sure many of you, for example, have used the Good Counsellor's Guide to Transport Planning, so they're also relying on this kind of feedback. I'll pause here and hand back to my colleagues at KCC. We've got a packed agenda today. Thank you again for all the help in organising this, Carol. So yeah, let's dive back in.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. We were unable to see you at that time, but we heard you absolutely clearly. So thank you so much for that. We have got an opportunity now to just take a few questions from our speakers so far. I did see a hand up, seems to have gone down. So if anyone would like to raise their hands, I'll just put this on gallery so I can see everybody. Okay. Oh, Charmaine, we can see you now. Great. I can't see any hands at the moment. That our speakers are going to be here. So if you do think of something you'd like to ask of Neil or Haruna or Charmaine, then by all means, you can take that in the next question session. So I think we've got one of our big items coming up now, which is from my colleague, Toby Howe. And Toby's going to be talking about the EU entry and exit systems. I think everyone's desperately wanted to have more information on. So Toby, if I can pass over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Carol. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can, yes.
Cool.
Can
Okay, I will
see.
share my presentation, and please let me know that you can see that when you. Okay. That should be on your screen now.
It is, thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Toby Howe. I'm the Strategic Resilience Manager for KCC Highways, but I'm also a tactical lead for the Kent and Medway Resilience Forum when it comes to all the traffic management to do with any issues at either the Port of Dover and or Eurotunnel. So what I'm going to be talking about is the EU entry-exit system, which has been alluded to in some of the previous talks so far, and it's really just running through exactly what it is and how it may well impact Kent. So, Carol, can you just confirm that it has changed screen?
It has, yes.
Great. Okay, good. So EES, as you see on the screen there, is the new electronic system that will be coming in for the EU member states, or specifically the Schengen area. And the Schengen area is as it shows on the screen there, so pretty much most of the EU states plus a few extras. And this is really about security, etc., and those that are entering the EU for third country nationals, of which we now are as a UK country. So it'll be used by border guards and enforcement authorities around the EU to monitor who is coming into the EU and who is leaving again. So, for example, at the moment, those of us that are lucky enough to have, say, a property that we go and stay in for our holidays somewhere in Europe, we're only allowed to stay there every 90 days within every 180. And this will monitor that, so it'll know when you've entered and when you've left. So the current scheduled date, and it's been postponed about 3 or 4 times so far, is that this will come in at 2 a.m. on November the 10th. You may well have seen in the media today that there's still some debate as to whether that's actually going to happen. We are planning for that date around the Kent and Medway Resilience Forum still, because I think we're reasonably comfortable that this date it will actually happen. How it will come in or in what form, we're still waiting for confirmation from the European Union, but at the moment that is the date that everything is planning for. So how does it affect Kent? Specifically, there are 3 portals in effect that we can travel from to get to the EU, which all affect Kent. Not so much is St Pancras, so Eurostar that runs from there, but specifically the Port of Dover and Eurotunnel are what we call juxtaposed borders. And what that means is that French customs are carried out on this side of the channel. Everywhere else, if you go, say, by a ferry from Newhaven to Dieppe, or if you fly to Europe, those customs will be carried out on EU soil. So Dover and Eurotunnel are unique in that way, and hence it's an impact on Kent. So the first time that you cross, once this has come in, you'll need to create a digital record. So what this means initially, you will be what's called a primo traveller the first time you cross, and you will need biometric process to be carried out. So your face will be scanned for an electronic photo of you, your fingerprints will be taken, and the chip on your passport will be scanned, and that will create that digital record. When you then travel following that, you will then only need to carry out one of those, such as the face and the 2 of them, the face and the passport. So it'll be a bit quicker, but it's that first time that we're a bit worried about. And this digital record will last for 3 years. So if you continually cross in that time, you won't have to redo the whole lot. But if you say update your passport, if you don't travel for 3 years, you'll have to go through it all again. So this is being brought in to improve that border security, as I alluded to earlier. And it's part of a bigger plan for the EU. So at the moment, this is just to monitor whether you're coming and going from the EU. But in about 6 months after this comes in, The European Travel Information and Authorization System will also come in, and that will be then a bit stronger. So that'll be a bit more like a visa when you're traveling to the US, for example. So you'll be paying a cost of about €7 to get this visa, your ETIAS, and that will come in following on, and that'll be much more for security, etc. So as I say, pretty much as those of us that have traveled to the US, it's a similar process, so it's a visa for that. So what's going on out there? Eurotunnel currently are carrying out and have been carrying out an awful lot of work to get ready. They're fortunate that they've got space on the site to carry out those. And the photographs there show you the new terminal, in effect, that's been created, that when you're traveling through Eurotunnel, you'll drive into that sort of curved shape building where you'll go up to you'll get out of your car to a kiosk shown in the top right there to actually scan your face, take your fingerprints, scan your passport, and then you'll continue your route back out as you would normally currently, where you can go to the terminal to have a meal, to duty free, etc., before you then come to the French border. So Eurotunnel are very fortunate that they've got that space, and they anticipate that that'll add possibly about an extra 5-6 minutes to the overall journey between check-in and the border. Port of Dover aren't so lucky. They do not have that space to carry all of those works out and build a wonderful new complex to enable you. So they are developing plans to be carried out at Western Docks. The little map you see in the bottom right there, the Western Docks are the yellow highlighted area at the bottom of the plan. So Port of Dover are doing works at the moment to enable cars to be processed there before they head to the main ferry terminal in the Eastern Docks, which is the bigger yellow area. They are able at the moment to process coaches in Western Docks, and they will be able to process coaches when this comes in at the Western Docks, where the coach passengers will get off, go to a kiosk, do all of the process that I've just mentioned at Eurotunnel, and then they will get back on that coach. That coach will be sealed and it will sail through the port. Cars currently, though, as I say, that is not available. So processing at the Port of Dover, all car traffic will have to then be processed on handheld devices actually within the Eastern Docks. So when you're queuing to go through customs at the Port of Dover, an agent will approach your car with what's like a big iPad. They will take the photos, they will get you to give your fingerprints and scan the passport. And it's that device shown at the top of the picture there. So of course, traffic issue is going to be the problem that we're going to see in Kent. As we've all seen now for a number of years since we left the EU, we've had Operation Brock and we've had TAP in place. So those of you, just to clarify, Operation Brock is used on the M20 between junctions 8 and 9 on the coastbound lane. And all freight that is travelling to the EU has to, by law, when this is in place, travel down the M20 and queue if necessary within Brock. TAP is the stage where freight is held prior to Dover itself, between Folkestone and Dover on the A20. And as many of us will have seen over the years, they are regularly used to control that flow of freight to the port. And what we're expecting is that the impact through EES will be greater than it was for EUX. EUX is totally focused on freight, whereas EES will be an impact on tourist traffic. Freight, there is legislation for, as I mentioned, has to, by law, use the M20 and A20 when Brock is in place. With tourist traffic, there is no legislation in place to manage. So tourist traffic will follow all of their sat navs, whatever system they're using, to try and get to the port in whichever route they can. It's a bit like herding cats of how we're going to manage that. So, of course, if we're going to have more tourist traffic queuing, more freight traffic queuing possibly, it is then going to have an impact on the local communities and possibly stretching out. So as we have seen since EU exit, we tend to see this queuing traffic at the holiday periods. And we're likely to see that still and possibly extended with more queues for longer. There have been rumours for some time out there throughout the year that we could see queues up to 15 hours. The Kent and Medway Resilience Forum are working very hard to look at ways to mitigate this, to really reduce the impact on Kent, residents of Kent, and communities and businesses of Kent. This is a problem that's actually been brought onto Kent through not Kent's making. So everybody travelling from Wales, the Midlands, Scotland, etc., that choose to cross the short straits from Dover or Eurotunnel, they come through Kent, and it is an impact on Kent. Working with the Department for Transport, KCC, are looking at getting modelling to see actually where those impacts are going to be, to see how we can put in resilience on those locations. So all agencies from Kent Police, CCAM, etc., are looking at contingency plans to make sure they can really try and provide the same services that they would without these delays. In addition, the Department for Transport are looking at some contingency sites. What we don't want is tourist traffic stuck for some time on the strategic or local road network in queues. It's not good for them, it's not good for the communities that are impacted. So Department for Transport, as I say, are developing some sites. But what are we looking for that impact? So initially, as we've seen, those delays are always initially in the town of Dover and the surrounding area itself. Dover has been badly impacted throughout this whenever there are delays, either through delays of lack of resource at the port or French officials or any other problems such as a crash on the local road network. Dover is that first area to be impacted. However, if we then see those queues expanding, we then see delays in and around Folkestone. We see Hawkinge cut off at times, etc. So we've put plans in place to really reduce that impact because there is the Roundhill Tunnel on the A20. Anytime that has been closed, that is when there is that huge impact on Folkestone and Hawkinge. So we've put plans in place to reduce that. When Brock is on, it tends to have an impact on all of the surrounding areas, specifically the A20. If there's any delay within Brock, if there is a crash, all of that traffic is diverted onto the A20. That then impacts everywhere back to Bearsted, all the way down the A20, Lenham, Charing, etc. So it has a huge impact on that surrounding area. If that then progresses even more, it then impacts Maidstone as well. You'll then see queues in the junctions as it goes back all the way to junction 7, which causes a huge impact on Maidstone. If we need to control traffic that it's coming down the M2 and A2, there is some traffic management that can go in place at Brenley Corner, and that then in turn has a huge impact on Swale, Faversham and all of that. So these are areas that can be impacted if we see those huge queues. So I stress again that an awful lot of work is going on between the Kent and Medway Resilience Forum, which includes Kent Police, National Highways, Kent County Council, Port of Dover, Eurotunnel, etc., to see how we can really reduce that impact on those communities. So what is going on as far as the Kent and Medway Resilience Forum are going on? As I mentioned, there is detailed planning, and that has been going on throughout last year and this year to really look at what can be done to really reduce that impact. KCC is the lead agency for all of EES planning, and there are numerous meetings with other agencies, with traffic management, with welfare, with vulnerable communities, etc. All of those plans are being developed, business continuity plans being written by all partners. So yes, those business continuity plans are being developed. We've got to make sure that there's good resilience for staff because we could have staff on standby for many, many hours. So making sure that people are trained and understand the processes. We've been testing these plans. There was a huge meeting up at Detling a few months ago with all partners really going through so that everybody understands what everybody else's plans are. And also reviewing lessons. We've seen these delays for a number of times, and each time there is a review following each problem to look at how things can be improved. But the main issue, as I mentioned earlier on, is this is a problem for Kent communities, for Kent businesses, that is not of Kent's making. So there is a lot of pressure then on government, on Department for Transport, on DEFRA, on whoever involved, to really find a solution so that it is not Kent that is impacted. But until then, we need to continue with these preparations for when EES does come in. So Carol, that is my presentation so far, and open to questions.
Thank you very much, Toby. So there's a question in the chat from Laura McLaren. In fact, Laura's got a couple of questions. Laura, would you like to raise your hand and you can unmute and put those questions to Toby? Okay. Okay, Lauren, yes, please. You can unmute.
Morning, Laura. Still on mute.
Right.
Morning, can you
There we
hear
go.
me?
I can
Hi.
now, yes.
Hi there. I just wanted to know, obviously you're talking about plans being made and the public don't know what they are yet, but given the proposed implementation in November and the proposed M20 quietening overnight roadwork, so that's going to be between Maidstone and Ashford on that stretch. Have you got any contingency plans for that and how it will impact locally between Junction 7 and Junction 9 and possibly on the A20?
So the works that are going on the M20 at the moment will be completed prior to this coming in. So it's ensuring that the two do not clash, so to speak, so that if Brock were needed to be put out, for example, when this has come in or beyond, then those works will be completed. The intention is that we shouldn't really need to see any traffic management until the Christmas getaway, but this will be monitored throughout. But if National Highways need to continue with any of their works that they're doing, then that will be scheduled accordingly.
Okay,
So yes, that is being taken care of.
Okay, and on Brock, just to pick up on Brock, the MP, our local MP in Maidstone, Helen Whately, is proposing to get Brock removed and has been championing that for a while. That doesn't seem to be a very realistic option given the port situation. Is that correct, or what's your view on that?
Brock is currently the only thing that the Kent and Midway Resilience Forum have available to control freight. So until the government come up with an alternative, such as further other lorry parks off-road, such as ways of controlling that flow into Kent, we are stuck with Brock, sadly, until then. But KCC are working closely with the Department for Transport to make sure that we are also looking beyond EES, looking to the future, looking to really mitigate that problem so that ultimately we can get rid of Brock. It's the last thing we actually want in place, but sadly it's all that we've got at the moment.
Okay. The other question that I asked, which wasn't really for you, Toby, but maybe you can answer it because it is connected, is about improvements to Junction 7 of the M20. The traffic at Junction 7 of the M20 at Maidstone, Detling. The improvements on the M2 have vastly improved the junction at Junction 5. So the traffic flows are amazing to Maidstone now. However, the Junction 7 at the M20 is a real problem, because it's queued all the time, the whole surrounding area is. Is there any plans to get that improved quickly so it improves traffic flows and obviously eases the situation at the docks as well?
It's not something I'm aware of, unfortunately. There may be some of the speakers later on that deal with transportation that may know a bit more about that. So if you keep that one up your sleeve for when the transportation team are on, they may be able to assist on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your answers. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Right. Thank you, Laura, for your questions. I can't see any other questions in the Q&A or in the chat. So people feel free to put your, so Laura, if you can lower your hand, please. If anyone has any other questions, if you just want to raise your hand. Can't see any hands raised. Let me just go on to the people so I can see everyone. Okay, all right, Toby, I think you might have got away with it, but don't leave, because people may come up with some other questions later. So if you can stay on, then when we take questions later on, we'll be able to, people think of anything, they'll be able to come back to you.
And as you say, if anybody wants to think of anything, put it in the chat and I'll respond accordingly.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so we're moving quite quickly through the agenda, which is good. People may get home early today. So our next section is on the transportation update. So I'm going to invite Tim Reed and his team to cover the next section. So Tim, can I invite you please to address everyone?
Morning, everyone. Hope you're well. I know a lot of you, but I'm going to be meeting a lot more of you in person next month when we hold the actual meeting at County Hall. If you don't know me, I'm Tim Reed. I'm the head of the division that plans and improves our network and works with you at a local level on highway improvement plans, deals with road safety, planning applications, and some strategic stuff as well. So I'll start just by giving you a sort of an overview, and there's plenty of detail coming, particularly on HIPs, which I know you'll want to hear about later from Nicola. But at a strategic level, you will have heard Neil say that we're expecting an announcement on the Lower Thames crossing on the 4th of October. I personally fully expected that to be dropped when the new government came in, given that it's a very expensive project, but it doesn't seem to be. And incidentally, at the moment, we've been awarded some money to look at Bluebell Hill and the connections at the top and the bottom, which would, given that's a local road, the Bluebell Hill, we're encouraged by that because it means potentially that the government are still intending doing the bigger scheme, which of course is the tunnel under the Thames. So 4th of October, we're expecting a decision on that. In case you didn't know, Gatwick and the Northern Runway extension, the development consent order, that effectively the inquiry into that ended on the 27th of August. There'll be a recommendation on that by the end of November, and I think the government will probably take the decision at the end of February next year. We're opposed to that because of the detrimental noise impacts in the west of the county and the limited economic benefit to the county itself. So those are the two really major strategic transport issues and schemes, if you like, that other people are promoting with the government basically and the airport that we're dealing with at the moment. On our own strategic plan, the local transport plan, we abbreviate that to LTP. The consultation for that is open at the moment. So that finishes on the 8th. What is that? Next Tuesday. So we're encouraging everyone to respond so that your views can be taken into account, because the draft document will be finalised and then it has to go back to full council for adoption. So it's the only document we produce from our directorate, from H&T, that actually goes to the full council, not just a cabinet committee. And that sets out all our aspirations and priorities for transport for the next minimum of 5 years. But as Neil and Haruna have already said, the word that's coming out from the civil service at the moment is that our financial settlement, in their words, will be brutal. So we just don't know at the moment how successful our plans and our bids will be in the future. But that doesn't stop us having our own local priorities and setting out what we need in this unique county of ours. There were exhibitions held. The LTP report itself went to all the JTBs, but you can go online on kent.gov. It's relatively easy to find and make your own views known. Or if you're representing a council, obviously you can make your own parish council's views clear on there. Just before I go on to the three things I'm scheduled to talk about, I just wanted to mention that planning is one of my things, one of our things, which means we're responding to planning applications and dealing with local plans. And the pressure for housing is just as intense as it ever was under the previous government. And it's a key priority for the new government. You've probably heard them talking about grey belt, and they're still persisting with district housing targets. We provide a response to the local planning authority. So in other words, we're consulted by Ashford or Sevenoaks or Thanet about 4,000 or 5,000 times a year, and we make comments back to them, and then they take the decision about whether the development should go ahead or not. To give you some context, although I'm 59 now, when I started doing this job in the mid-80s, if we said no to a planning application, and forgive me if you've heard me say this before, the local planning authority had to take that advice. Actually, it was a direction then, not just a recommendation, and they couldn't allow it if we felt that it would have a detrimental effect on the safety or the capacity of the network. Well, over the intervening 35 years, the process now and our influence within it has been so diluted that what effectively now is we recommend, and the burden of proof is on us and not the developer, if we do want something refused, to demonstrate that the impact will be severe. There's no definition of severity, and that causes us a great deal of trouble at planning inquiries, although we do have a pretty good success rate when we eventually do go to inquiry if we are determined to turn something down. I've got to say, the planning inspectorate, and they are an independent part of the government, effectively. They're appointed by the Lord Chancellor's department, but their priority is to deliver houses. And I haven't really seen any consistent evidence that any of the restraints, be it drainage, be it power supply, be it hospitals, roads, they're not really seeing those as major obstacles anymore. And there are a great many planning consents granted in this county that we're finding it very difficult to deliver. So you've only got to look at Chelmington in Ashford or Whitfield in Dover to see how difficult it is to get these major sites developed, particularly when you've got a developer who's reluctant to pay what they're obligated to pay legally towards infrastructure. The evolution of transport policy is heading away from us providing for car use, and the government are telling us through the guidance that we should be looking at sustainable modes, and you know what that means. It's walking, cycling and public transport. We're fully aware of the HIPs, all the parish HIPs, and wherever we can, we get the developers to help fund these if the opportunity's there. But we are obligated to work with developers, and the presumption is in favour of sustainable development, and it is a very high bar of proof if we want to object. As far as the sort of detailed stuff, the nitty-gritty that we're going to cover this morning, Nicola will be talking to you in a moment about HIPs and road safety. Electric vehicle charging points. The previous government asked for expressions of interests just about a year ago now for monies to provide on-street rapid charging points. And they indicated that if we put the right kind of business case in, we could benefit in the county from up to about 12 million quid, which represents about 10,000 chargers, we hope, on the public highway. This is primarily for those without access to their own off-street parking space. It would take a very long time to do it, about 10 years. It won't be an easy thing to do, but we're hoping to hear very soon from the Office for Electric Vehicles about the outcome. We've been waiting for a long time. We're first in the queue. We were the first authority to get an expression of interest in. We've got a team working on it. There's plenty more information that we can provide you in writing eventually about where these chargers will go. But you can imagine the kind of furore we're going to create on the parking front. Imagine a terrace street or a tight street in a village where there is no off-street parking. You put a charger somewhere, and the local resident, for argument's sake, with an electric vehicle is going to automatically think they're entitled to use that space, and that anybody with an ordinary car can't park there. It's not going to be an easy thing to deliver, but the money's there, and we're going to have a very good go at it. It will very probably be delivered via a third party, via a private company. But there'll be more on that when we get the confirmation, as we hopefully will, that we've got the money from the government. On our Vision Zero strategy, which you probably know revolves around the safe system concept, that underpins the whole thing, which is basically around safe roads and streets, safe speed, safe behaviours, post-collision response and safe vehicles. We're doing a lot of work through the Kent and Midway Safer Roads Partnership with multi-agency groups working on that. I have to say to you at the moment, I think the police are way overstretched on enforcement at the moment. They're finding enforcement extremely difficult, by which I don't mean cameras, I mean traffic cops pinching people for speed, which is a rare sight in this county in this day and age. But we're developing all our community engagement work. The team that Nicola manages has been restructured to offer a higher level of direct engagement with parishes, and we're going to continue to promote the safe system through the HIP process, but Nicola will be telling you more about that in a moment. We'd love to be able to help all 320 parishes and the town councils and the unparished areas, but do just remember that we're heavily governed by how much finance we've got available. I think that's it from me. Happy to take any questions, and I know that
Tim,
we've got...
would it be okay if we took the questions at the end?
Yeah,
I can see there's a couple of hands up, but just do a section, then we'll take all the questions if people are happy with that. And also, please remember you can pop those questions in the chat. But if we hear the next two presentations, then we take questions.
okay, all right, thank you.
Would you like me to come in now, Carol?
Yes, please. I've just realised I was on mute, trying to unmute myself. Thank you, Nicola.
No problem. Right, I'm going to start with sharing my screen. So hopefully you're going to see a full screen, but if you can just confirm that, Carol.
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, welcome to everybody again, and thank you for coming along today. Just to introduce myself, for those of you who I haven't met before, I'm Nicola Floodgate. I'm the Road Safety and Active Travel Group Manager. So what does that mean? Well, that means I look after the teams. We've got a collective now group of people that respond to road safety concerns, highway safety concerns. We also deal in road safety education, road safety training, publicity, campaigns. We have the driver education team that deliver the courses that you may be offered to go on if you're caught by Kent Police with a speeding offence, and I also oversee the active travel teams as well. So I'm just going to talk you through a bit more about the team, but just before I go on to that slide, I just wanted to clarify. So I work under Tim Reed in the transportation division, and obviously there's also the highways division under Andrew Loosemore. But just to reassure you really that we do work closely with our colleagues in highway operations, because a number of the issues that come up on the highway may be regarding maintenance, replacement. It's not always new. Now my team deal in the new, but we do work very closely with the operations colleagues as well. So this next slide really is actually a Wordle that we created in a previous training webinar with my team when we were talking about Vision Zero. And I asked the question, what are the key challenges to achieving Vision Zero? And you can see some of the feedback from the teams, and this was with wider teams as well. Behaviour is on there a lot, driver behaviour, resources, speed comes up, you know, every single day in inquiries. Maintenance of the network, somebody talked earlier about the deficit really in funding that we have for maintenance, and that really does have quite a big bearing on the safety and the perceived safety and the conditions of our network. So yeah, I want to highlight really one of the key takeaways today, that road safety really is a complex situation. It's a complex series of events that results in a collision on the network, and it requires a complex and multifaceted response, hence the restructure that we did back in 2022 to try and bring together all aspects of road safety and active travel, because yes, we want active travel. We want people to have that choice to walk, to cycle. You know, every trip starts generally with a short walk. So it's really important to address road safety and active travel as a collective. So just to introduce the team, obviously I've introduced myself. We have 5 managers in the team. They have quite a broad remit. They have a lot going on in their teams, but they're broadly put into these 5 boxes. We've got our Vision Zero strategy manager. That's Mark Bunting. He works alongside colleagues that deal with the Kent and Medway Safety Camera Partnership. Our safe speed enforcement team have very close ties with Kent Police. We also have crash data in that team, so they have a statutory function. They work very closely with Kent Police in looking at the Stats 19 records. And there is also the Kent Driver Education team that I spoke about that deliver the Endors courses. Then we have active travel. In active travel, we've got your contacts that work with the districts and boroughs on their local walking and cycling plans. We have Safer Journeys. They deliver pedestrian and cycle training to children and adults. And then we also have Active Travel Infrastructure, where we've been able to secure in excess of £12 million in the last few years for named active travel schemes across the county, working alongside Active Travel England, who are a department body that oversee all active travel delivery in Kent. And then we have our highway improvements team, East and West, which we're going to talk about in a lot more detail today. And then last but not least, Road Safety Intelligence and Innovation team leader. So Stuart Fowler, he works alongside all of the team and is able to harness, and we've been able to create some really, really exciting, quite cutting edge dashboards of information, whether that is speed data, whether that is incident data, crash data, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go on. So as I said, and also Tim said earlier, we did have a restructure in 2022. A big part of that is to align with the Vision Zero strategy. So you can see the circle up in the left of that slide. All of those elements of the system have to be looked at to try and either reduce the impact or the severity of a collision occurring, or hopefully preventing it from occurring at all. And everything we do sits around that Vision Zero wheel. And I think the really important thing to think about here, if anyone hasn't watched one of our Vision Zero clips, there's a link at the end of my slides, but it's essentially the Swiss cheese model. So something in the system needs to have failed for a collision to end up with a fatality or a serious injury. And it's our job to try and address whichever element of the system has failed. So Vision Zero is understandably the only real ethical target we can have. We do not want to see anybody killed or seriously injured. We know that humans will continue to make mistakes, they'll make errors in judgment, but what we want to do is to reduce the chance of that ending in a life-changing or fatal incident. And that may be through safer roads and roadsides. That could be through passively safe infrastructure on the network. It could be through the way road users behave. It could be to do with the nature of the vehicle. Is it a safe vehicle? Is it a legal vehicle? And it could be to do with speed as well. Speed is a huge, huge factor, not only in the likelihood of incidents occurring, but also in the severity of it. Vehicles that are travelling 20 miles an hour or 23, 24 miles an hour are much less likely. Oh, somebody seems to have their mic on, because I've got a little bit of feedback. Oh, there we go, it's stopped now. So vehicles travelling slower are more likely to be able to react and prevent a collision from occurring, and they're also less likely to be involved in a serious collision. So safe systems really underpins everything that we do as an authority, but it's also national and international best practice, and we are gleaming a lot of good work with other authorities and institutes to try and strengthen the work we do around road safety. So, what is our business as usual? I just thought it was important just to cover some of the work that the team do. We are going to focus quite a lot on highway improvement plans and the types of small or medium improvements that parishes may wish to raise with us and see delivered. But we also have casualty reduction measures, and I'm going to go on to that a bit later, but it's really important to stress that our casualty reduction programme is a statutory function. So where that awful turn of phrase that we try and get away from about not enough people have been killed or seriously injured, that probably originates from the statutory function that we have to look at where people have been killed and seriously injured, and we have to address those sites as to discharge our statutory function. We also deliver what we call LTP schemes, so they're funded from the local transport plan block allocation, which comes from the government. My team also deliver externally funded schemes. They may come to us via Section 106 agreements. So there might be a small sum of money and a specific scheme that needs to be delivered, which may have been linked to a planning consent that was granted by the district or borough. We also then try and deal with customer and parish inquiries and schemes, member schemes, and also active travel schemes. And what do we mean when we say schemes? Well, there's all sorts of different schemes. It could be road safety schemes, that could be junction realignments, it could be changes to signs and lines, it could be new crossings, whether that's a zebra crossing, a safe refuge, a push button crossing, pelican crossing. We often do work alongside our public transport team to improve the infrastructure there, whether that's improvements or new, stopping improvements, looking at schemes to improve visibility, whether that be safety or due to parking arrangements, etc. And also walking and cycle routes, traffic calming schemes, and 20-mile-per-hour schemes. Again, timescales for delivery. Schemes can take a very long time to design and deliver, and they can cost a lot more perhaps than you might typically think. So before we can get on to involving a contractor and delivering a project, there's a number of things we have to do. Investigation, we have to collect data, we have to collect on-road survey data, it might be topographical surveys to see what's actually on the ground. We have to do design work. We have to consult. It's worth noting that any changes to speed limits, we have to consult with Kent Police, and we do have to take their feedback on board, because what we do not try, what we try not to do is work against our partners. We try and get them to agree with us about what the safe speed should be. But also we have to have some mind of what the compliant speed might be and what the appropriate speed might be. Often that's quite, two things can pull from each other, because what a safe speed might be for someone living in a nearby area and wishing to walk there, they might like to see slower speeds, but it might also be an important road in terms of its strategic connection, and there might be some considerations about keeping the network moving as well that have to be considered. Because as we know, roads have more than one purpose. I always use the analogy that when I'm a pedestrian, I want cars to drive really, really slowly, especially near my house, near my children. When I'm in the car, I'd like to be able to travel fast enough to get to my journey in a safe way. We don't want to see people speeding, but we know everyone has a different perspective when they're in a different vehicle. So yes, there's consultation. That can be light engagement, that can be formal consultation. It can take anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks. Then we have various governance depending on different projects. We might report the scheme to a joint transportation board. If there have been objections, we might have to do a traffic regulation order. Then we would have detailed design. We would work with our term contractor, and then the delivery, the road space, and the work to get the scheme delivered on the ground. So what might seem like quite a simple project can actually take a lot longer than you might expect. And I think the other thing to point out is what can be quite frustrating. I think Neil used the word frustration. We get given our funding from from government in 1-year blocks, so we may not find out what our funding for 2025 is until February or March, but then we only have until February or March the following year to have that funding spent. So we have to compress schemes, we have to do the investigation, the design, the delivery in quite a short period. You only have to have a couple of instances of bad weather, issues with getting road space, and then schemes can be sometimes delayed, which really it's important that everyone knows. There's no surprises, stakeholders are aware, but again, sometimes these things can be more frustrating than perhaps we would think they are in the first place. So where to go for help? Depending on what your inquiry is, if it's about a maintenance issue or something to do with more reactive sort of operational work, you would normally go to your highway manager team, your stewards in the first instance. Certainly for things like winter, salt bins, But then we have the highway improvements team. So we have been restructured to try and create a team of professionals who have been given, hopefully, the right tools and resources to be able to work really well with parishes. And we have got some examples of where that is working really well. I always think there's always room for improvement, and we're continuously trying to improve these relationships. And the work that we've been doing with Calc and the newsletter is helping that. The highway information pack, I've got a slide on that later, is a really useful resource for parishes and for members. And yeah, the notes, the Calc website, I think Charmaine referred to, there's a lot of information and resources on there. And then I have just put at the bottom the reporter problem. If there is an issue with the highway, it's really important to use that fault reporting tool so that any inquiry is logged and can be tracked and you can get your response so it doesn't get lost in a system of emails. So earlier I spoke about our road safety research and innovation team. That does sound like a really grand title, but it's really just, it's a very small team. I think there's 3 of them, but they work alongside our crash data team. And whilst it might not be too visible on the screen, this just gives you a little bit of an idea of the dashboard that we've created. Now, what we've been able to pull together here is not only collision data from our Stats 19 database, but also any reported damage only data, where there might have been claims or recharges, perhaps bollards that have been damaged. We've also overlaid that against traffic surveys that we have already got. That might include surveys that have been done by developers. And we also overlay it with speed data, either that we've collected from those surveys or from some new data we've been able to source, which is from telematics in vehicles. And what this is able to give us is a really, really granular look at the speeds and the behaviours on the network. When I say behaviours, 2 of the new data sets we've been able to source include incidences of harsh braking and incidences of harsh steering. So we hope that by looking at areas where there has been perhaps harsh braking or harsh steering, we might be able to see where there are incidents that could occur that haven't yet occurred, that we might be able to do some work on to prevent injuries and incidents from happening. I just wanted to point out there, we're probably one of very few local authorities that have been able to pull together this data. And from a trial with a firm called Compass, we have got some really, really useful telematics data that is the highway improvements team are using on a daily basis. Right, slide 10. That sounds really negative, doesn't it, managing expectations? It's not meant to be negative. It's really just to give a bit of an overview of the amount of parishes and activity that goes on alongside us delivering our crash remedial programme, our CRM programme. So the highway improvements team in East and West Kent are dedicated to delivering as many feasible parish and town council schemes as possible. But it's also important to point out that by simply putting an outcome or an idea or a scheme on your highways improvement plan, even if you say, well, it's got lots of community support and we've got some ideas for funding, it doesn't guarantee that we are going to be able to deliver this engineering solution. We are restricted by what is legally possible, which is set out in the traffic signs and regulations documents. And we're also restricted to what's physically and technically possible. Sometimes some difficult and frustrating things like land or stats just can be more of a problem than may be seen by perhaps the layperson crossing the street. And I think it's fair to say that sometimes there are no measures that we can deliver that will instantly resolve the concerns that your communities or the communities you represent might have. But we absolutely don't want to leave it there. And if we cannot find the right solution in terms of engineering, then we do want to be able to signpost you to other parts of the team within the Road Safety and Active Travel Group. That might be through the Safer Road User Behaviour Change team, looking at things like campaigns, looking like education, training, publicity. It might be by us helping you to work closer with Kent Police, whether that's through Speedwatch or just us saying to the police, look, we've got some data that shows this is taking place. It might be occasional, but we'd really like some targeted enforcement to take place. Or it might be through working with the district or the borough council if it's in relation to perhaps parking or planning or development activity. But looking at the issues together as a group, we benefit from all of the team's experience, and we do want to really find the right resources and solution where there is one for you. And this is a slightly negative comment, but I just feel it's important to make. It's really important to me and to the team that colleagues in the team are treated with courtesy and kindness and professionalism. And we have had some incidences where some of the communications have been less than favourable. So I would just encourage everybody to speak to the team in a way perhaps they would like to be spoken to, because I think it's a difficult job and it can be frustrating, but I can guarantee the team will do all they can. And do feel free to take my name and drop me an email if you don't feel like you're getting that service. So one of the more recent things the team have developed is the toolkit. So the highway improvements team have worked with other colleagues in the Active Travel and Road Safety group to offer some resources which we don't charge for, but to try and support parishes and town councils to take ownership and do some work themselves so they feel like they're actually able to try and bring about some change, particularly around compliance of speed limits. And it's lovely when I drive around the county and see the bin stickers. I've seen some when I drive through Boxey Village. And it's really about us trying to empower you, to give you some assets and some information to help communicate the message and remind drivers who perhaps are driving through your lovely village and kind of not being respectful of the speed they're travelling. So it's the limit 30, it's a target, not a limit. Sorry, it's a limit, not a target. And the healthier, safer Kent, so the 20-mile-an-hour toolkits. There's a lot more that we do with regard to toolkits, and we're trying to develop them in partnership with ideas that come from parishes. I know we've got some responsible parking toolkits that are really popular with schools. So we'll just direct you to the Kent Road Safety website that's on the screen there. But as somebody said earlier, all of these slides will be sent round via Calc, so you'll be able to access those links. So I spoke earlier about the Highway Improvement Plan information pack, the image on the left. That's a kind of A4 glossy booklet, maybe not that glossy, but what that does is that gives you so much information about all the different types of interventions that people may want. People may be coming to you saying, we really need this, we really need this. You can look at that and you can perhaps see some of the reasoning and some of the decision making around the thing that your parish maybe think they want, and you can see whether that is right for you. You know, it doesn't take away the need for that professional advice that we would like to give, but it does give you some really good information about the various highway improvements and some of the processes that go through and some of the costs. So there's information in there on mobile SIDs that another team would deliver, but we certainly support with that. There's information in there about the cost of surveys, and there's information in there about some sort of small signing and lining improvement schemes. And then the image on the right is just the example of one of the highway improvement plan templates that we work with parishes on. So really slide 13, as I said, we do focus on our crash remedial programme first. That's our statutory duty. We have to look at where people have been killed and seriously injured and see what we need to do, what we can do to try and stop that injury or that collision from happening again, or at least reduce the severity of that. But it is a really important part of what the team do now, working with parishes. And somebody in the team's got me some statistics. So between April and September, there have been over 140 meetings have taken place between parishes and towns councils, and also with county members. So they really are meeting a lot of parishes and giving them as much support as they can in trying to push forward your ideas, the areas that you want looking at. We've delivered nearly 70 parish funded or highway improvement plan funded schemes. Some of those have been funded by parishes and towns themselves, just under £35,000 worth, but we've also funded almost £100,000 worth of projects from your highway improvement plan ideas. So I think you can see that we are working with parishes. There's always room to improve, I'm sure, but I do think we are sort of heading in the right direction. And I hope that some of the feedback that we've been having with parishes lately is going to allow us to continuously improve. Then I've got a couple of slides here where I just wanted to share a couple of the recently completed schemes the team have worked on this year. So in the east of the county, Eastry Bypass, this was a crash remedial scheme to try and reduce the speed and the likelihood of collisions on the approach to the junction. And then on the right, I believe this is in Canterbury, it's a new zebra crossing scheme, quite close to the universities and some residential areas. And then the last recently completed scheme was that I wanted to share today was the Running Horse Roundabout scheme. This was one of our top crash cluster sites in the county. Every single year it was on the top of the list, kept seeing mostly slight, some serious. Thankfully, I don't think any fatal collisions, but we were seeing lots and lots of collisions happening here. And then what we were also seeing is our colleagues in ops were constantly having to go out and fix posts that had been damaged or debris from crashes that was on the highway. This has been, so far, we've been monitoring it. It's been open for around 3 months, and we have already been able to see that in the few months it's been open already, we have seen a reduction in those harsh steering and harsh braking incidences that I spoke about earlier from our telematics data. So I think this was a really good project by the team. And then last but not least, this was a really nice example of where the highway improvement team worked with the county member. I think it was Mike Soul. There was issues that residents couldn't access, or residents that were having mobility issues, perhaps those in wheelchairs, couldn't access the bus stop. So we've been able to work with them to create an accessible stop for users. And I think sort of quite a small improvement, but will bring great benefits to the wider community. It would be wrong of me not to mention active travel, as I do oversee this team as well. And whilst it wasn't on the list for what I was supposed to be talking about, I just wanted to share some examples with you. We have school crossing patrols, pedestrian training. There is a great app if anyone likes getting out in the countryside and walking, the Kent Connected app. We oversee and work with schools that run walking buses. We deliver the bikeability training, what used to be called the cycling proficiency, and we give adult bike training, whether that's for confidence or for new users, and that includes e-bikes. So there's a really great level of activity going on in that team as well. And if any of you have contacts at schools or community groups that you would like to access any of these, please feel free to contact me afterwards. Thank you for the plug, Charmaine, about the newsletter. So Emma Tilbury and Jenny Watson in the highway improvement team have been working really closely with Calc and with parishes, and they've produced these newsletters. We're on issue 2 at the moment. I'm told they are distributed to all parishes and county members, but we'll make sure they're also shared with Calc and they can be published on the section of the network that Charmaine referred to earlier. And that's the end of my slides, but I just draw your attention to our Vision Zero website as well, where you can see some of the progress to date that's been happening. And I just think it's important that we finish on the road safety aspect. And I'll be here for any questions as the day goes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. We have got a few questions for you and for Tim. Some have already been answered, but what we'll do is we'll just take Neil Edwards his presentation. So Neil, if we can ask you to present, then we'll take all the questions after that. Thank you.
Yep, thanks very much, Carol. I shall just get the slide deck up. Why is it not? Is it in presenter mode? I cannot see.
It is, yes, we need
It
it
is.
just in normal.
Second, I don't know. Unusually, I'm having some difficulties. Bear with us.
That's come up now.
I think
Neil.
that's fine now.
Excellent. Super. Thank you. Sorry about that. Good morning, everybody. Neil Edwards, Traffic Manager at Kent County Council, and here to talk about Part 6 of the Traffic Management Act, which is around moving traffic enforcement and offences. So, and my slide deck is not moving. There we go. So the Traffic Management Act was introduced back in 2004, which sounds quite a long time ago. And you may hear it referred to as TMA, and apologies now, I may refer to it as TMA this morning. The Act has many parts of it in it, and some of that is a statutory requirement placed on us as the Highway Authority. It places a network management duty upon us to manage the network and effectively try and make it as efficient and optimised as possible. Part 6 of the Act, which are civil enforcement powers for moving traffic, were never enacted despite many years of huge pressure from various lobbying groups and of course, local government association, and of course lots of highway authorities up and down the country, because being seen as a pivotal tool to helping us support manage our network. So a few years ago now, it was announced back in September 2020 that the final elements of that Part 6 was going to be enacted, and up till then, bar London and Cardiff, who got specific powers under different bits of legislation, they're the only areas in the country that are actually able to do it. The government introduced new legislation, and as of 2022, a lot of highway authorities applied and got the powers. So I think the current number is about 45 in the country, of which Kent is one. And effectively, up until that date, or up to recent times, it's only been the police that can enforce that as a criminal offence. And there's obviously some of that has been ad hoc because of other policing priorities, but also talk about when we get into a bit more around what we can and can't do. We're still reliant on the police themselves to actually enforce quite a few of the moving traffic offences as well. So key objectives, that's the list primarily set out in Part 6. So there's a number of key objectives there for enforcing moving traffic itself, and a site, effectively a site or location that's identified for enforcement must meet one of these criteria to be able to enforce. And of course there might be sites and locations where a number of these key objectives may be met, but one is the golden rule, as it were. So when the powers were introduced back in 2022, these are the limitations, as it were. This is our list that we can actually enforce. How the government got to this list and defined it, no one ever knows, and we probably will never know. But this is what we've got, and no more effectively. Anything away from these, the police are the only ones with the powers to enforce. And even though we have the civil powers to actually enforce these, the police still have the right to enforce these particular restrictions as well, under their own criminal proceedings and powers. So, and if in the event that they were to enforce where we're enforcing, they effectively hold the trump card enforcement. Theirs will always have a stronger weight than our civil. So what does it mean for us as a county council and highway authority? Well, it's a key tool for us to help support manage our network. It's not you'll see many press articles over the years saying it's money maker and it's blanket and cameras are going to go everywhere, and straight away by our own objectives and principles, the legislation and the regulation behind it does not allow that or does not permit that. Enforcement needs to be targeted and only used where it's absolutely needed, really to support the safe movement of users on our network and maximising its efficiency. Meets and supports the key objectives of moving traffic. So those 5 that I just showed you, it has to meet one of those. And we've taken on a county-wide approach to our enforcement. And I think one of the points that I want to make this morning is that we can't just go to enforcement. So I always refer to it internally as kind of our last line of defence. We have to have taken all reasonable steps to address the issue in the first place before we even consider enforcement. So at a site-specific location. So restriction could be a reasonable steps could be considered a grey word, but what is reasonable? So for example, if we're looking at a restriction at a junction, saying a right turn, for example, if people keep ignoring that right turn and are contravening that restriction, a reasonable step might be for us to look at and revisit the signage and the road markings, and that would be considered a reasonable step to try and engineer the issue out. Spending millions and millions of pounds redesign the junction may not be considered reasonable for many reasons, including the financial position. So that's very much where we have to go through a very much a prescribed process to make sure that we go through those steps before we even get to the point that we consider enforcement. And we're taking a county-wide approach to this, unlike our on-street parking that's managed by our 12 district council and borough partners. Very much to ensure that not only enforcement is transparent across the county, but when we get evidence and data collection from sites that we're enforcing at, we can clearly identify and catalogue the benefits of that enforcement, and also use that information as to what's effective and perhaps is what not, and where would it benefit our network in other parts of the county. So part of what happens when we enforce is that there's a lot of compared to London and Cardiff, it's quite different in terms of these regulations that have been set out, and it's England only, just to note that to help mitigate the kind of public perception and the media coverage that it's a money-making exercise, we provide the motorist and highway user the understanding, the seriousness of the enforcement at each of the locations. So for example, in London, if you drive into a location that's been enforced, you get a ticket, you have to pay it, blah blah blah. For us, with these new powers, in the first 6 months of the operation of a new live site, for a driver's first offence, we have to issue a warning notice. So it would just be a letter, which is in a sense a bit like a get out of jail free card, as it were. But that's really about providing information to the driver, so A, making them aware of the restriction, B, what they've done wrong, and hopefully encourage them to comply with that in the future, but also warning them that if they don't, they will receive a penalty charge notice. Those penalty charge notices are set by government at a national level, so that's £70, reduced to £35 if paid within 21 days. And there's a very much prescribed process for representations, appeals against that charge if the driver thinks it's unfair, or they don't think they've contravened it or have evidence to the contrary. They get that opportunity to make their case, and all of that information is detailed in the penalty charge notice that they would receive in the post. The last bit there as well is that if in the event that later down the line we look to, so the income that we get from this we are able to keep, and that covers the cost of our operational service of operating the enforcement service. But in the future, if we were able to generate any surplus, then that is again heavily legislated as to around what that can be potentially spent on. So going live, we've been live just over a week. So we went live last Monday at the bus gate in Beaver Road in Ashford, and as of Monday, so a week, we've had over 300 possible contraventions. And I say possible because each contravention is captured by two cameras effectively. One is ANPR, so that's picking up the registration number of the vehicle, so we can get the keeper details from the DVLA, and we also capture the video evidence of demonstrating the evidence that someone's contravened the restriction. So the cameras do that in an automatic sense, and that comes to our officers in the team, who then do a manual human review of that evidence to then make a decision as to whether or not to proceed to issue a warning notice, as it is at the moment, or potentially later on a penalty charge notice, or whether or not there's other reasons that it might be discarded. So we're also due to go live at Sackville Crescent last week, but we've got a lot of roadworks and diversions in the area. So we've, due to the nature and part of the not wanting to confuse the motorist as well in the area where there's temporary diversions, we've suspended the start date of that until currently 9th of December, on the assumption that the roadworks and streetworks by the various companies involved is completed on time. We've got other numerous locations in the county looking to come online between now and spring next year. A lot of them are, or nearly all of them are, bus gate related, so there's a lot for fast track in the Dartford area and the new bus rapid transport in the Dover Whitfield area as well. And we will probably be looking to have around 12 to 15 sites live by spring next year. Future sites, very much regulation requires us to be transparent in evidencing the level of contravention. So this is where you might need things like camera surveys to actually understand the level of the problem, and also goes back to part of the process of, well, actually, can we take any reasonable steps to try and engineer out the problem? Because in some cases it might be very evident from that data collection that camera enforcement is required and it's the only option, or there might be other opportunities. And when it does as well, we have to make sure it meets one of those criteria, that we've got one of those 5 key objectives, such as supporting road safety or tackling congestion. And before any enforcement's taken forward, again, we have to carry out a statutory consultation. So that's a minimum 6-week consultation. And we have a dedicated moving traffic offences webpage on kent.gov, which also links to a dedicated, we have a consultation hub specifically for our area, and there's a couple of consultations live on that at the moment. So that's continued, and that really, the consultation from that is really looking at what is the public opinion of enforcing it. And generally to date, to be fair, 70 to 90% of those respondents are very supportive of enforcement, but it's also really an opportunity to perhaps flag some local detail or some local information that, again, back in that transparent process of, actually, that member of the public has suggested this, and perhaps we should try that as a part of the reasonable process step first before we actually go to the camera enforcement as that default. Is there funding? This is the magic question. The short answer to that is no, effectively. So if there is a location identified and we've evidenced it and we've consulted on it, then that is all subject to finding some money somewhere to make any necessary changes to the highway, but also to site the camera equipment. And obviously the camera equipment requires to be placed on a pole and have its power connections and data connections and so on. So it's quite involved, and that will be a challenge, I'm sure. So that was a whistle-stop tour around moving traffic offences. There's a link which will be on the slide deck when you receive a copy of the slides. If you go on Kent, in the meantime, if you go on kent.gov.uk and search for moving traffic, it's the first result that comes up. And as I mentioned earlier, there's off that main moving traffic page, there are links to our consultation hub where views are sought on proposed enforcement locations. So very welcome to have your say. Thank you very much for your time, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Neil, and there's definitely a question in the chat for you already, so we'll pick that up in a moment. But I know we have got a couple of hands, and we've also had some questions in the chat. So if I can take the raised hands first, I'm just going to open up people so I can see VS Val Springett. If you'd like to unmute, you can ask your question, please.
Thank you very much. I've actually got 2 questions and 1 comment for 3 different of your speakers. So very quickly, while Neil is hot off the press, who do we contact to get some of the zigzags by crossings enforced? For example, in King Street in Maidstone, that every day people are parking on the zigzags outside a chemist in a really awkward place. I mean, it's relentless. And also the restriction on no cars down the high street. Who do we have to talk to get those enforced? I wonder if Neil could answer that.
Yep, more than happy to. So the first one, although zigzags is a bit of a strange one, and I won't go into too much detail, but technically they can now be enforced under moving traffic as well as a waiting restriction. It's a bit of an oddity, but effectively our district and borough council partners can enforce those as we can issue a penalty charge notice from their parking services. So that's
Great.
the quickest and most efficient route to getting support on that. In terms of Maidstone High Street, I already know that the team have been working with Maidstone Borough Council and others discussing that in particular. The restriction for no through vehicles is obviously there. What the challenge is that we're starting to sort of process and work through is that within that restriction there is permitted access. So as you're probably aware, there's disabled parking within the zone and so forth. So we're working with our supplier and also talking, because to be fair to us, we've only started enforcing of last week. We're also talking to some people like Derbyshire who have been doing enforcement now for over a year, to try and get some learning from elsewhere as to how they manage that. Because obviously, if we have a disabled driver, or it doesn't need to be a disabled driver, but a vehicle with a disabled badge that is able to park within the zone, how do we permit them access without issuing them a ticket? And that's the kind of things that we consider the deliveries and all of that legitimate access. And at this stage, it's not an easy magic wand, but it's something that we're looking at, something we're working on, and we're working closely with Maidstone on.
Thank you very much. I'll get on to Charlie about the zigzags then. Thank you. It's the young lads on the Saturday night that think it's okay to come through in their souped up cars and make a lot of noise, that I'd quite like to target on the high street, although it's not my patch. Right, Tim. Question for Tim. You know me, Tim. We've met before, and I'm a pain in the arse. This relentless drive for housing at all cost, and planning inspectors that are pro every development. Do KCC ever feed back to the planning inspectorate where conditions that the planning inspectorate have imposed do not work? I'm citing Willington Street in the dip, where we just know in the winter, that the HGVs will go gently down the slope and get stuck trying to get up on a frosty morning on the other side. So that is one. And the other one, again related to that same development, land west of Church Road, Ottham, is the requirement was widening the junction between Spot Lane and the A20 to allow a vehicle turning right, cars turning left, to pass a vehicle waiting to turn right. That was a requirement. They've done the roadworks. It's not wide enough. So it hasn't done what it says on the tin. So the condition technically has not been complied with. And I just wonder whether the KCC ever feed back to these, I'm sorry, ignorant planning inspectors who have no idea what they're doing, and all they're doing is giving you a problem to deal with further down the road.
Yeah, we do, Val. If I genuinely thought they were ignorant and couldn't help themselves, I think I'd call it. I think they're on a directive. I think they're instructed to take these decisions in the way that they're taking them. Willington Street has got to be the most acute
nightmare.
And I mean, without getting us into all sorts of potential hot water, and given that we've been in the highest court in the land with Maidstone Borough Council in the last 10 years, having that foisted on us has been a very difficult place to be in, and we're keeping a very close eye on that junction. If we, Val, if we have to take it out, we'll take it out. But we were in a really difficult position there, very invidious position, placed in there by the Borough Council. I think one of the most powerful things we could do with a new government in place is get CALC and maybe even the National Association of Local Councils to try and broker some sort of meeting with somebody from, by which I mean not just a civil servant, I mean a politician, from Department for Communities and Local Government or on the planning side specifically, because regardless of political colour, any government coming in to Westminster, particularly this one, will have very, very limited experience of government and how it works at a national and local level. Now, okay, they're at their most popular at the start of their tenure with the least experience, and by the end, it's the other way around. We need to help them understand how the National Planning Policy Framework and the situation we've got now up and down the country, and it's not just Kent, I have to say it is at its most acute in Kent, I think, I mean that, how it's actually working out in practice, because I just don't think they fully appreciate the situation. Sorry, I'm just going to plug my computer in because it's about to run out of battery. Sorry for disappearing. I genuinely think there's a total underestimation in this country of how anxious people get. They call it NIMBYism when we all object to stuff. But what they don't seem to understand is the reason we do object in these situations is because we know that we'll get the housing and we won't get the infrastructure. And we're as frustrated at county level with that as anyone. I've got my own personal views about how we could perhaps do something about it with planning reform. The worst thing that ever happened to us, apart from the loss of power of direction, was the structure planning went out the window. So that was the process by which you could say, well, it's a county, it's a rural county, principally in terms of land use. We should be putting, the majority of the development, for argument's sake, in Kent Thameside, in Eastern Quarry, or wherever, or in previously used land elsewhere. There's a lot to be said on the planning side, which I think would be better said directly to government. And if you want to try and get it going with CALC or NALC, if that's the acronym we use for them, for the National Association, I'm up for it.
I could probably get it going via Helen Whately, who is the Shadow Minister for Transport. I've already got a meeting scheduled with her, hopefully in November. So that might be a route if you want to liaise with me. That might be a route.
Yeah, I mean, I know Helen, and probably as well as you do. I think it's the new, it's Rayner and it's some of the others that we need to get into. In my opinion,
I could possibly do that via one of the Labour councillors at Maidstone, Maureen Cleater. You probably know Maureen Cleater.
I know Maureen. Yeah.
Maureen might be a very good way in. Thank you, Tim. Nicola. School streets, Medway are going heavily down the school streets route at the moment. Are Kent looking at doing that perchance?
Yeah, thank you. We actually were first on the school streets programme. We've put 3 school streets in now, but we started with an approach that is very much led and managed by the school, sort of saying to the school, if you want to support this, we will support you, but you've got to help yourself. So in our school streets, we have barriers and staff man barriers. We didn't go down the camera angle, ANPR cameras, which is what they've done in Medway. Yes, we are looking at potentially some sites that may then be through camera enforcement, but it's not something we want to impose on communities, because whilst they, they're great in that they don't require manning, but they're not always great in they do sometimes then create a bit of a divide between communities. Just for full disclosure, I'm a Medway resident and they're not always as popular as perhaps as they could be. So yes, we are looking at them. If you wanted to speak directly about school streets, I'll write the name of the lady who manages the school streets programme in the chat.
Please. Yes,
it's Iona Rajolski, but I will write out her full address for you and she would happily chat to you a bit more about school streets, because yes, I think there's definitely more we're going to do there.
Super, and thank you. And just this is for your information only. I have set up a group called the CPTG, the Coordinated Parishes Traffic Group, and I've got 8 parish councils together, all who are sort of adjacent to each other, so that we can work with Greg McNichol. And can I praise Greg at this time? He's always been very supportive and brilliant, so that we can look at things in the round. So, for example, where we have something like Pilgrim's Way that goes Boxley, Detling, Thurnham, Hollingbourne, and we're looking at speed reduction measures, we look at it in the whole on that stretch rather than Detling doing its little bit and Thurnham doing its little bit. And so far it's working really, really well. So we're looking at that. So it might be something you might want to look at in other areas, to just get little groups together to work. You know, you can then consolidate things like consultation exercises and traffic orders can be, you know, so there is an economy of time and scale on that respect. So that's just for your information.
No,
and then
great,
this is just a general one, really. The Bearsted Road Improvement Scheme that has gone into hiding for the moment is going to create real problems for Bearsted Village when it's completed, because that moves the queue from the New Cut roundabout to the junction with the A20, New Cut Road and the A20. And that then hits the queue to the Willington Street junction, which is struggling for any improvements at all. So it won't take commuters very, very long to work out. They can just nip down Ware Street and through Bearsted, and then all the little residential roads, to avoid the queue at New Cut. And it's just a plea, really. I would really, really welcome some support and some input from anyone as to how we can manage that when that road improvement scheme is completed, because the street in Bearsted is like 1 car wide. There are no pavements outside some of the properties' front doors. We get the full force of the M20 when they shut it to put Operation Brock in, as Toby well knows, because I'm on this all the time. From 9 p.m. till midnight, we get a huge increase of volume of traffic that just follows its sat nav through the village, and we could really, really do with some support from those with expertise on what we can do to try and manage that situation. So that's just a plea out there if anybody wants to contact me. But thank you very much, and thank you for your presentations.
Thank you, Val, for your question.
Val. Just briefly.
Thanks, Tim.
Junction 7 and the 249 Bearsted Road link is by no means a certainty at the moment. We've got into a very difficult situation with Colas. You will have noticed they're not at the Kims anymore. There's a reason for that, yes. Without going into any detail. So you know, if and when we get that scheme built, and a better version of Junction 7, because the current signalised scheme doesn't cope with the local plan traffic, let alone the existing traffic, let alone local plan. If we get Bearsted Road built, I would hope and think that we would have to do something on traffic management for Ware Street. And in the fullness of time, when we get the powers fully implemented that Neil's been talking about, Neil Edwards, that's a prime candidate for enforcement, and if not enforcement, for engineering. But Maidstone is a curate's egg. I mean, we all know it's just the perfect example of cramming housing, trying to solve it with capacity improvements, and actually, you know, facing up to the reality that unless you knock the entire town down for a new road, which you can't do, you know, we're in a very difficult position. Reading, has anybody been to Reading? Reading's like a puffed up version of Maidstone. It may not even be any more puffed up. It may be the same sort of problem. You've got this exponential explosion of traffic, with people not having, you know, they would say particularly realistic alternatives, and a change in government policy, and over the last 20 years on the provision for the motorist, and an inspectorate and a borough council. I don't want to be too disparaging, but because they're in a difficult position themselves, that have had to put housing in this place, and when they try and put it elsewhere around the town, we get equal difficulty. You know, ask anybody in Lenham about what's been going on with Heathlands. It's symptomatic of the planning system, which I have to say, I hate to use it because it's jargon at the moment, but it's broken, and we've got to try and work together and do something about it.
Thank you. And just for, I've been working since the days of Russell Borman on the Ware Street issue, but I will end it there with 4 little words. Leeds Langley Relief Road, and that's all I'll say, because that would solve that problem.
Thank you, Val.
Thank
I think we're all
you.
aware of that. Okay, so we've got a few more questions that we'll take. Some questions have been answered in the chat. I know that Nicola's put some answers in. So if we don't get to those questions, then they are actually in there. So Jim Moore, you're next on my list. Jim, if you can unmute. Whilst we're waiting for Jim, okay, his hand's gone down. Rich from ACOL, that's all I can see. Sorry if I've. Do you want to unmute and do your question, Rich? Can I just check with my tech team that people are able to unmute?
Yeah, I've enabled the mic, so Rich should be able to unmute himself.
Okay, right. If you want to go ahead then, Rich. Unmute yourself and do your question. Sorry, we still can't hear you. So, Laura, if I can come to you, because I know you can definitely unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions, but leading on from what Val's just said in relation to the traffic problems around the M20 from the A249, can I first ask Neil about how you would qualify for cameras for enforcement? The problems that are being experienced on the A249 are that the no right-hand turns signs are being ignored, the no U-turn signs are being ignored. So of each of the 3 junctions to Detling Village, which are all on the A249, are experiencing serious accidents. Now, we all know what happened with Jades Bridge and why Jades Bridge was built, because these are extremely dangerous locations. However, given the criteria you've described, one assumes we wouldn't qualify for any intervention. Are you looking at areas of this nature, and how might we address this?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Laura. So yes, very much so. We're looking at a number of different locations and types of restrictions across the county. In this regard, we've got I can't think what the road is, but there's a right turn in Charing Village, for example, that gets abused and contravened on a regular basis. So it's very much that although we have we follow the rules and the general policy and approach to enforcement, when we're actually looking at the site specific, so whether it's a non-right turn on the middle of a dual carriageway or a right turn in the middle of Folkestone or wherever it might be, we would have to look at that specific location and look at what data is already available, see what's been done. So but we're talking very much here about safety. So in particular, what Nicola's team have done in the past. If and again, if there's a lot of liaison between our team that are kind of the that's not the right word is, but the supporting arm of this, and the teams that exist within transportation, such as Nicola's, they've got the expertise and the knowledge of what's going on, and obviously the step around, is there anything else that we do before we go to enforcement? But yeah, quite happy, Laura, quite happy to pick up that one offline and have a look at those a bit more specifically, and work with other teams internally to see what's been done to date and see what potential there is there.
Okay, thank you for that. And Nicola was quite encouraging in saying that they would look at other signage and things first. And I have got some ideas for those interventions. So maybe we can discuss that outside this forum. I've also got a question for Tim Reed, and that was really building on the issue of the fact that we get housing development, which is outside our control and outside the control of KCC. We all know that obviously the infrastructure never matches the needs of that housing, and it's more about the influence that you can have as KCC to try to address the fact that the road structure needs to be in place first, and how proactive you can be in making sure that that actually happens. So, for example, the problems on the M20 are now being caused by the improvements on the M2, and as Val's just said, that then is going to knock on to Ware Street. So we're kind of all aware of the longer term issues that are coming down the line. How much can KCC, mitigate that and be planning for it on our behalf?
So what the way that we do that, the bit of the process that we use for that purpose is the local plan process. So the borough council will come to us and they'll say, right, for the next local plan, we've got to fit 27,000 houses in, for argument's sake, to the borough, and we've got these locations identified. And so we throw back very general comments at that stage, because they rather than detail, what they do is they put a red line around a big area of land. Would that be okay? Would that be okay? We're one of the only authorities now that have got a county-wide model, which is basically a predictor within a computer software, to say, well, if you put like 3,000 houses there, it will cause these problems. So we feed back to the districts at that point and say, well, it would be better if you put it here, or don't put it there. But in the end, they are having to follow government guidance and the law, and they can't very often accord entirely with what we're saying to them in terms of need, which is why there is this desperate need now, I think, for some sort of, I'll call it sub-regional, but we call it county, don't we? Planning of how the generators of traffic are going to be located. We do our very best at that stage, is all I can say to you. We put as much influence as we possibly can onto the authority, whichever planning authority is, about where they put the infrastructure. And you know, there are occasions when it works or it nearly works. So we've got 2 or 3 major projects. One of them's Chart Road in Ashford, which is stalled at the moment because the developer is trying to wriggle out of their obligations. Another is Sturry Road in Canterbury, where we are in a better place with that. And we say, well, okay, you can put some houses there, but you've got to provide this funding or this road. I think what we'll see very soon, and this is subject to our own members' approval, this is my opinion and not theirs necessarily, but I think we're going to have to change our approach, whereby if a developer or a set of developers want to promote a site, then actually, rather than give us the money to do something and leave us with the problem of getting a contractor and getting it built and collecting the contributions and taking the risk and getting the land, we're just going to be saying, well, you've got to do it. You've got to do it yourselves. How that will go down with the local planning authorities and how successful consortia of developers can be is a moot point. But all I can say is we strenuously do our best in these situations. And as Val said earlier, she and I have been in the same place, in the same inquiry, in the same town hall. You can talk till you're blue in the face to an inspector about stuff like traffic and journey times and road safety, and they don't tend to view it as a genuine constraint anymore to development. I think they take the view that it's solvable somehow with money, which actually in places like Maidstone it isn't necessarily. And that the most important thing is to say, well, we've got the units consented, we've got the housing supply met, and that's not, I don't think that's all that realistic at the moment in the 21st century in the southeast.
I appreciate those comments, but going back to the Bearsted Road improvement and then other influences. So we already know Maidstone's completely overcrowded and the roads are in complete crisis. So the existing structure is not good enough. When a new development goes in and the planning application is objected to, say for Bearsted Road, that data never seems to be taken into account. The data that was produced by the applicant did not reflect at all the current situation, in my view. And when it went to appeal and I wanted to object on the basis that the information presented on the traffic flows was inadequate, we were told that we couldn't do that because of the planning stuff. And I wonder how much KCC are able to take into account existing traffic flows and implications of other changes in a wider area, as well as directly on that particular location, because it seems to me that that's what's going wrong.
I see what you mean. Yeah,
we can look at the traffic flows on. We can look at the traffic flows on the Bearsted Road, but that doesn't take account of all the traffic that's coming from Willington Street and the Running Horse Roundabout or the A2 junction improvement. It doesn't take account of all those things.
No, we can't lawfully. We can't ask the developer to solve existing problems, and that piece of legislation changed about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So we used to be able to take that into account. Now all we can do is ask them to consume their own smoke, ask them to mitigate the traffic that they generate, and that's you're quite right, and that's why you see so much development on development on development, and that's the law now. That, well, it's the guidance and it's the statute. It's a very long and complicated process. I think it always generates a lot of debate at these seminars. I'm coming to the actual the physical meeting that we're having in County Hall. I don't think there's any harm in people coming twice, once to this, once to that. We've got briefing stuff. We could talk for hours, and Carol's got to manage this thing, so I'm going to shut up.
Okay.
But Laura, I'm quite happy to talk to you directly, and so are the staff, and particularly for your bit. We've got a very capable officer called Brendan, who Val knows, who will help you.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Laura. We've run a little bit over time, but I'm conscious that some people have had their hands up for some time. So if I could just take Rich, Sarah, and Jim, because they've had their hands up for a long time. And if you could just keep your questions short and to the point, and hopefully we'll get some quick answers back for you. So, Rich, if you can unmute, you're the first one. It still seems like you're having problems unmuting. You should be able to. I'm going to go on to Jim. Jim Moore, could you unmute and ask your question? Can I just ask Kat or Raji, are you able to unmute Rich on his behalf?
No, I can allow him to use his mic, but I can't unmute him.
So you've allowed him to use his mic. Rich, are you able to unmute? Right, I'm going to just keep going down the list, just in the interest of time. Graham Cox. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the break. Please hold those questions. We have got a chance for questions later on, and we'll see if there's any sort of technical problem going on behind the scenes. So if we go back to the agenda, we've now got a break, and we're back at 11:40. So if people are happy to still come back at 11:40, although that's a bit of a shorter break, that gets us back on time. So we'll see if there's any problems and try and sort out the unmuting of the mics. So back at 11:40. Thank you very much. Thank you to our speakers this morning. Welcome back, everyone. So we're going on with our agenda. So if you have got any questions, we have got another opportunity for questions at the moment. Jim, I can see your hands up. Kat, my colleague, is just going to remind people how to unmute. So Kat, can you just do that, please?
Yeah, currently everyone's microphones are disabled, so when it's question time, I will allow your microphones, and along the top in the toolbar there should be a symbol of a mic. If it has a line for it, you're currently muted, so you just need to click on it and then you should be able to talk and we should be able to hear you.
Thank you very much for that, Kat. So just moving on with our agenda now, there's been mention of buses. I think Neil mentioned it at the beginning. And we've got Phil Lightower, our Head of Public Transport, to talk about the bus service improvement plan. So over to you, please, Phil. Just checking, Phil, that you are on the call.
Carol, doesn't look like he is at the moment.
Oh, okay. Well, what we'll do then, we'll move on with the agenda and we'll come back just in case something's happened with this connection. If Andrew Loosemore is on, we'll go straight to the highways update, please. Andrew's here. Okay. All right. Whilst we're waiting for people to get in position, we have got some questions. So what I'll do, if I go over to those questions, we can take them now. So Jim, I can see your hand still up. You should be able to unmute yourself in line with what the instructions is given by Kat. So if you could do that, you can ask your question, please. Kat, can you just confirm that you've enabled Jim's mic?
Yes, I have. Yeah, he should be able to unmute.
All seems to be having a problem. I'm really sorry about that, Jim. I'm not quite sure what's happening there. If you've tried to just click that mic and it should unmute. But if not, whilst we're waiting, I've got Sarah who has her hand up. Sorry, I can't see your full name. Sarah, are you able to unmute? No, okay. Anne Brindle. Right, if people can just give us, Anne.
Yeah,
thank you,
I
Anne.
think it's not a question, it's just that when I'm looking at my screen, where it's the camera and the mic, they've got like a no entry sign on them, which means that people that have got both of those, I can because I've only got the mic, but it seems that there seems to be a technical problem for people to unmute themselves, and it must be your end because everybody, or the majority of people, have got that grayed out at the very top on the toolbar at the top. When you get to camera and mic, they're grayed out and it just says unable to mute.
The majority of people will have that because everyone's mics and cameras are blocked, but when people put their hand up, I do individually allow their mic, so they should be able to now.
Right, but if we're going to have problems with that, we have got the Q&A box. So can you pop your questions, please, into the questions and answer box, and then we'll go in there and pull those questions out. Laura, I know you've got your hand up, but you can unmute. Is this a new question? And we can take that whilst everyone's sorting themselves out and getting their questions up.
Yes, it is a new question. It's a question for Nicola, and it's about rural lanes. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay. So it was a question for Nicola about rural lanes.
What is the question, Laura?
Right, the question is, rural parishes, particularly ones with narrow lanes, which have the national speed limit, are being increasingly used by traffic to obviously avoid congestion on major routes. What road safety schemes and behaviour educational plans do you have to encourage drivers who are using those areas, particularly where there's difficulties like horses, cyclists, no footpaths and walkers, to actually drive appropriately for those lanes? because it is a real problem. And as you know, there was a double fatality recently in one of our lanes.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we do offer a range of products, if you like, but I think the first thing to say is, whilst we as the Highway Authority can and do encourage campaigns like Share the Roads, which is one of our more recent one, it obviously does require drivers to be, you know, to show empathy and care and attention when driving. And I can, you know, I absolutely can sympathise from what I've seen on the network, where people have chosen to rat run through lovely towns and villages at an inappropriate speed. So yes, we can look at a number of things. We can look at you know, enhanced signage. We can work with whoever's doing the roadworks to try and discourage inappropriate diversions. We can use very targeted social media campaigns for specific demographics to try and discourage rat running, to share the roads more considerately. We work closely with the British Horse Riding Society to try and remind people about equestrian use. But as I did sort of allude to in the chat, it is a complicated and difficult situation, and it does require us all to take responsibility for our own driving. And I appreciate that's quite difficult for me to say to you, because that doesn't give me the magic wand answer. But all we can do is try and work with communities to really push forward those campaigns about safe and considerate driving. You're in Detling, I believe, aren't you, Laura?
That's right. So I'm talking specifically about the Pilgrim's Way, which obviously runs a huge length of Kent. It is a real problem for all the adjoining parishes as well, but it's also partially because the national speed limit is automatically 60 miles an hour. So all those combined characteristics, when they're put together, it's a melting pot for a dangerous situation. And it's more about whether you've got any particular campaign for rural lanes to try to educate people, really, Nicola.
Yeah, no, very good point. I mean, Pilgrim's Way, actually, for some sections of it, we have reduced the speed limit because we were advised to by a coroner under a section 28. Personally and professionally, we didn't necessarily think that was appropriate, because what de-restricted, the national speed limit means de-restricted, so it means you should drive to the conditions of the road. And unfortunately, what a lot of drivers think when they see that white circle with the black line through it is that it's a 60 mile an hour limit. Well, it isn't. It means drive to the conditions of the road. It's de-restricted, or it's de-restricted, not unrestricted. We have got some rural campaigns, and I'll send you a link separately for those. But if anyone is interested in those sort of rural campaigns, just to remind users of those local networks, yeah, we can certainly make those available to you.
Okay, and it sounds like this speed reduction was introduced as a result of an accident, because it was a coroner's request. Can I ask what that speed limit was reduced to?
I believe it was reduced to 40 for a section.
Okay.
However, it's not appropriate. Well, it's not appropriate to drive at 40.
Well, it's not appropriate to drive at 60.
No, it's not. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's a bit of a national misunderstanding of what the national speed limit means. It doesn't mean 60. It means unrestricted or de-restricted. As soon as you then put a sign up that says 40 or 50 in a red circle, you're effectively saying that it's safe to drive up to that speed, which it isn't. And we do have this.
Laura, can I just stop you just for a moment? Phil has arrived. There will be a chance for questions later. Pop anything else in the chat for Nicola, and we'll just want to move on with the agenda. So thank you very, very much for your questions. You've really kept things moving. But I'm going to ask Phil now if he'll join and do his presentation. Thank you, Nicola.
Morning all. I haven't brought any slides with me, and I haven't done a presentation, but I just thought I'd give you all a very quick briefing on BSIP. So some of you will have been here this time last year and updated on the bus service improvement plan. So Ken received tranche 2 of its bus service improvement plan that came through in July of this year, and some of that is a total of around 19 million. Just over 19 million, which is split between revenue And capital, and the capital element is effectively just under 12 million. So tranche 2 has been received, and in addition to the BSIP funding, we also got a year of what they call BSIP Plus. What BSIP Plus funding is used for is providing support to the existing bus network. So there are around 51 bus services in Kent currently supported by BSIP Plus funding. 49 of those are very much school services, so any services that run school day only or serve schools, and 2 of them are services down in the Folkestone area which are off-peak. In terms of the BSIP programme itself, many of you will have seen that we published the original BSIP, and we were then required to do an update to it for June of this year, which gave an idea of the kind of projects that weren't funded in the original BSIP, in the original BSIP funding allocation that we would do in the time frame 24 to 29, and that was submitted into the DFT on time, along with a number of other documents. So where the BSIP programme sits is it is officially due to finish on the 25th of March 2025. A number of programmes will run beyond March of 2025, and that is just because of procurement or design or the fact that a major construction programme, and therefore DFT have been made aware of that and are quite happy with that. But on the ground, the kind of things that you'll be seeing in the coming months is we're now nearly have nearly completed testing and development of a new public transport information portal for Kent. This has been procured from a third-party supplier, and we're looking to launch that in the coming months, and that'll be a one-stop shop for quality information about bus services. And I use that term quality information because there are a number of bus apps out there and bus timetabling sites. Not all of them are up to date, but this one will, because it will be fed by our own systems and our own staff. So there'll be a new public transport information portal. I can't tell you what it looks like because they won't let me see it yet, in case I no doubt criticise the colour scheme, but they're coming up with a very swanky design which will be launched very shortly. We're also looking at fitting across Kent, there'll be a programme to fit QR plates to bus stops, and when you take and I'm not good at this, I have to put my hand up and say this, you take a picture of the QR plate and then it will take you to the information portal, and the information portal will carry the timetable information for that stop, and where we have a reliable feed from the bus operator, it should carry the live information as well. So through the QR plates you should be able to go to the new portal, and you should be able to get a host of information, and it's the way to go, certainly in the short term, in terms of some of our more rural locations. So that programme is in development and is being rolled out as we speak. There will be a programme to fit real-time information displays at major stops across the county. Funding was provided through the BSIP for that, and we will be rolling that out in the coming 12 to 24 months. In addition, there's been a number of bus priority schemes, one in Thanet, one in Dover, and 2 out in Kent Thameside that we funded through BSIP. So overall, there's been a lot done with BSIP. That we supported holding the price back on the Kent Travel Saver, and alongside with the BSIP Plus, there's 51 services that wouldn't be running without that support. So it's all excellent news. Beyond beyond March of 2025, I think we have to just really be open and honest and say we have to wait and see what happens in respect to government funding. There's a lot of talk, as a number of you will seen, from government about how committed they are to buses, and we will see if there's further BSIP funding in March of 2025 and through to 29. And we've got some really good ideas and some good projects that have come off the back of that. For yourselves as a parishes, I suppose the big thing that BSIP did do is it allowed us to do a significant top up to our community transport grant, and a number of parishes and a number of community groups benefited from that, and we've been able to also point a number of community and parish groups to other community transport grants. I think this one run by Motability, which is meant to be rather good. So we've been able to do that. Again, focused on parish and community transport groups, as vehicles have become their time expired on our Kent carrier, because our operators don't want to run a vehicle that's older than 7 or 8 years old. But we've had a number of minibuses that have come back from Kent carrier, and we've been able to place those with community groups because they've still got a working life in them, and getting a fully wheelchair compliant vehicle for a community group, even if it's slightly older, has been a really good benefit. So this year we've done a lot through the BSIP, we've done a lot with the community transport grant, and we'll try as best we can in the future years, subject to funding, to doing that. I suppose the other big piece, the other two big bits, public transport news are, you will have seen that government launched a piece about the Better Buses Bill, which is around bus franchising. Funny enough, I'm responding to the consultation today on that. Whether bus franchising for Kent is a good idea or not, I think there's a lot more work to be done to determine whether we could really get major benefits out of it. You do get control by being the franchising operator. You can do lots of things with your network, but with control also comes financial responsibility for the network. So you suddenly find that you have to fund lots of initiatives, and in good years it's not so bad, but in bad years you're left with the picking up of the costs. It's a bit like the days when buses were in public ownership. The local taxpayer paid when the bus company lost money. So we're having a good look at that, and over the coming probably 6 to 12 months we'll develop more of a policy position on that for the authority. And finally, in Kent Thameside, we are going electric on our fast track service. So the operator will change from mid-November, and it's going to move from Arriva to Go Ahead Group on a different contractual basis. Go Ahead are very good. They run a number of services for Transport for London, as well as being a very good commercial operator. And it will go electric. It won't in mid-November, because Sod's law is you go to order your shiny electric bus and you find out that actually the day they can deliver them is not the day you want to start the contract. So initially there will be diesel buses provided on the fast track service by Go Ahead. They will probably run till March. The electric buses themselves are starting to be delivered. There are now 4 in the United Kingdom in the depot. We need a total requirement of 28 for peak service. They are what they call opportunity charged electric buses, so the chargers will be at Gravesend and in Dartford, so they charge at the end of each route. They are a bit different than your normal bus. Some say it's a tram on wheels. It doesn't look like a bus. It's a very different product. It's the biggest thing you notice with the vehicle is there's no noise. It's a very different environment than being on a diesel bus. There's very little noise and very little vibration. So we've got electric buses coming for Kent Thameside, and down in Dover, the Dover Fast Track will launch in November again, because the delivery times of electric vehicles, which I won't bore you the reasons for that. The 5 vehicles for that won't be arriving till, well, it could be anything from 3 months to 9 months. It really depends on the supplier and negotiations ongoing, but that will start with diesel vehicles. So it's an incredibly busy time for the department. There's been a lot done. And yeah, we're like everybody. We're waiting for the budget at the 30th of October to see what it really means for us. And that's the update, Carol.
Thank you very much, Phil. Can I ask if anyone, because we're running a little bit late, if anyone has any questions for Phil, could they put them in the chat? And then, Phil, are you staying until the end?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
I can do.
and then
yeah.
we can probably pick anything up in the final question session. So thanks very much, Phil, and I'll pass on now to Andrew Loosemore, Head of Highways.
Thank you, Carol. Good morning, everybody. I'll just get my presentation up on the screen. Is that in presentation mode, Carol? Is that looking okay?
It is, thank you. Okay,
good morning, everybody. Or good afternoon now, actually. I'll try and keep mine as brief as I can, try and get us back on track. But I've got a couple of topics that I'm going to talk to you today about, specifically about. But I think picking up from Tim's earlier presentation and what Nicola was saying, the differences between Tim's transportation side and my highway side of the business. So essentially, Tim's team will deal with anything that's new, new strategies, new policies for implementation. But my teams essentially deal with anything that's there at this moment in time. So any highway asset that needs maintenance or management is predominantly done by everybody in the highways department. And we've got about over 300 people that are currently working in the highways teams. So we cover such things as our highway managers with the engineers and the stewards who operate at a local level in terms of highway maintenance. We undertake our statutory inspections. We manage our bridges and tunnels, street lights, drainage, major resurfacing. Of course, the very important winter service, that's gritting the roads during the winter period. High-speed road program, and the pothole blitz program that I'm sure everybody knows and has heard about, that we've been delivering for quite a number of years now, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that as I go through my presentation. A couple of things I haven't mentioned. One is soft landscaping. So Robin Hadley will be doing a presentation on the work that he does, but specifically about how we manage weeds in the highway. And then Alison will be talking about a really emotive subject for everybody, and that's roadworks on the highway and our responsibilities in terms of how we manage those roadworks, particularly the works of utility companies, and hopefully doing a little bit of myth busting in terms of what our responsibilities are and what we can and cannot do actually in terms of how we manage all those works. So I'll move on to the specific topics that I'm going to talk about today. Three things mainly: highways term maintenance contract and the procurement of that very large contract that enables us to deliver very many of the services that I've just mentioned. The pothole blitz and future capital funding for maintenance, and just going to finish up with a little bit of update on our online reporting tool. So the procurement of the highways term maintenance contract. Now, this is the tool, the vehicle, whatever you want to call it, by which we actually conduct the engineering construction side of the works that we do. We operate as an intelligent client, so all our teams essentially deal with customer inquiries, inspection of the highway, and all the work that we do as part of our highway maintenance activities is predominantly delivered through this contract. We spend about anything between 50 and 60 million pounds a year through this contract. And as Nicola spoke about earlier, the interaction between the transportation side of H&T and the highway side, Nicola's team make a very good use of this contract in terms of delivering all the scheme work that's undertaken, and including some of the highway improvement works that you will do as parishes. So this current contract that we have with Amy has been in place since 2011. We've extended it a number of times over the years for various reasons, particularly about affordability. It was an economically advantageous contract. There were some frustrated times in terms of COVID, and then the impact of hyperinflation, Ukraine war, etc., that caused a lot of grief for the market in terms of the supply chain and the resources available. So we awarded a further extension to take us through that period of time, and really to get us to a point whereby the market in terms of resources and prices and price increases had stabilized somewhat. So we extended this current contract for a final time up to the 30th of April 2026. So that commenced as of the 1st of September last year for a period of 32 months, and that's given us sufficient time just about to allow for retender of the contract. So this is our timeline for the whole procurement and commissioning process. So we started pretty much about a year ago. And since January this year, I've been working through a number of different aspects of the progressing of the commissioning, undertaking a lot of member engagement, member briefing sessions, looking at all our contract documentation and specifications, and jumping really quite ahead to the current month, September into October. Took a key decision to our Environment and Transport Cabinet Committee, a report for information. So our Cabinet member can take the key decision to enable us to award the contract at the appropriate time, which will be in about a year's time. So we're moving into the phases of the really detailed tender process, engaging with the market, looking at receiving supplier questionnaires before Christmas, then going out to receive then the initial contract prices through the submission of the initial tender, moving through negotiation stages to enable us to award that contract at about September time next year. Now, the reason that we will be awarding it in September and not waiting until May next year is that any new contractor will need to have the assurity that we are actually engaging in a contract with them. And of course, they will need a good 6 months to enable them to mobilize the new contract in terms of resources, fleet, and the whole management processes and teams to get them in place. We're currently on track. The SQ supplier questionnaire will be going out to the market on the 21st of this month, and a full program then of procurement taking us right through until next year. So that's the update of our term maintenance contract. Next thing I wanted to talk about is funding, and we've heard earlier on from our Cabinet member and others in terms of how we receive money from government and the problems that we have in terms of the level of that funding and how we invest it wisely into maintaining our highways. So annually, the DFT maintenance grant that we get is about 40 million. As you see, the grant that we had for 24-25 was just shy of 41 million. The lion's share of that grant is spent on improving highway assets, including annual maintenance resurfacing programme. But about 4 million of that as well, Nicola will receive in terms of undertaking all those schemes that she will do and her team in terms of road safety and traffic schemes. In addition to that DFT grant, KCC have taken the decision to invest a further £25 million per year. That was a member decision a number of years ago, and that is continuing certainly into next year. So we top up the maintenance grant to ensure that we can invest at a level that gives us a good return in order to maintain our highways. In addition to that funding, this year, we received a further 8.6 million from the DFT, and this is where the government chose not to spend the money on the extension of the high-speed road network from Birmingham to Manchester, and the money that they saved from that, they put into a scheme called the Network North funding. That pledge, as you can see the last bullet point there, was made by the previous government, and out of that funding, KCC was due to receive 135 million additional funding on top of the DFT grant for the forthcoming 11 years, and year one of that being last year. So we are in year two of that now, hence the 8.6 million that we received to deliver this year's pothole blitz funding. Currently at this point in time, being that that was a previous government's pledge, we don't know what we're going to get next year, and we are unlikely to know until after Christmas. So that's making us a little bit nervous in terms of how we then can continue to fund a pothole blitz programme, and indeed what we can do with any additional funding to maintain the highway network. But as we do, and has been mentioned by Charmaine earlier, we engage with CALC and Charmaine's teams on a regular basis. We do a number of presentations and publications through the current newsletter, and I can assure you as soon as we hear anything at all about future government funding, we'll make sure that we get that information out to parishes so you can understand the level and the intensity of the highways improvement programs that we've been undertaking for 25-26. The last part I wanted to come on to was our online reporting tool. Now, I know this is a bit of Marmite for some people, in that some people love it, some people don't like it so much. We have reviewed the position with our online reporting tool and looked to see if we can get improvements in it. We've done quite a lot of market research into options for changing it, improving it, but there doesn't seem to be any one system that gives us everything that we need in an affordable way. So we've been continuing with our current online reporting tool, and I'm pleased to say that it has grown quite substantially in success over the years. When we first launched it many years ago now, probably 8 or 10 years ago, must be at least a decade ago, we were seeing online self-service reporting somewhere in the region of anything between 10 and 15%. That has grown year on year, and currently we're seeing self-service by customers in the region of anything between 70 and 80% of direct reporting. And this really is the best way. And again, I know I probably pledged this at very many parish seminars over many years. It really is the best way to get information to us. If you can log anything that you want in terms of an inquiry, it will guaranteed go straight to that team. So it avoids you having to track down individuals, track down people, or even write a letter to us or send us an email. The online fault reporting tool is really working very well in its current format. So Carol, that is the end of my presentation for now. Thank you, and we can probably move on to Robin.
Yes, please. Robin.
Just going to get my presentation up, Carol. Okay, is that the one? Can you see that, Carol?
I can indeed. Thank you, Robin.
Excellent. Okay. Hello, I'm Robin Hadley. I am the Soft Landscape Asset Manager for Highways, and I've been asked to do a talk on what our current weed programme is, but more importantly, what alternatives have we looked at, and what are we doing to see if we can minimise the use of glyphosate. So to start with, I was going to talk about our current weed programme. We currently carry out 2 weed treatments a year, one in sort of April, May, one towards the end of the year around September time. So we're just finishing the weed treatment now. That is aimed at hard surfaces. So all of hard surfaces within the highway, including footpaths, rear of footway, gullies, traffic islands, anything that's hard. We only spray hard surfaces. The primary aim of that treatment is to maintain the highway safe, to remove trip hazards, make sure that we don't have any instance where people are tripping over or can't access the footways. Another important aspect of that as well is that it helps us to keep the infrastructure clean. So we don't want instances of buddleias growing in, like the picture on the bottom right, of buddleias growing in our infrastructure, because they ultimately will start to damage the infrastructure and will be more costly than the treatment. We use glyphosate, which is approved by the HSE, and we use contractors that are competent in applying that herbicide. There has been some concerns raised around glyphosate in the past, and that's really why we have looked at alternatives and also how we can minimise it anyway. We only treat green weed, so there has been some misconceptions that we are doing blanket spraying across the highway, and that's not been allowed for, I don't know, for over a decade or two. We actually use the herbicide that we use, which is glyphosate, actually is a spot treatment. So the contractor will spot treat the green weeds. It only affects green weeds, and it is a systemic weed killer. So it is, once it hits the weed, it will be translocated around the plant. So one of the benefits of using herbicide is that it will kill the top growth as well as the roots. So you will lose the weed, and that's something that we'll come on to in a minute with the other slides. But that, from glyphosate's point of view, is one of its main selling points. It is at the moment, I mean, we've done an awful lot of trials, but it is at the moment the most cost-effective and efficient way that we have found of controlling weeds, particularly with the amount of roads that we've got. We've got 4,300 kilometres of road to treat, and plus footpaths. So it is quite a large-scale operation.
So minimising the use of glyphosate. We have been looking at ways to minimise the use of glyphosate back in 2010. We did a Fanic weed trial. We then did another trial in 2019 in Hales Place, and then we did one in Warmer in 2020, 2022.